Friends, welcome to my channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It's not difficult for you, but it's nice for me, and we're starting. My God, darling. I had no idea I'd hit you so hard. How bad is it? 7 stitches, Julie. What did you expect when you hit me in the back of the head with that heavy lamp? You could have killed me. If I had expected Julie to show remorse, I would have been disappointed. She stared at me, chin up, defiance in her eyes. Well, what did you expect from me when I came home early and found you in our bed? In our bed, making love to this one. This, a woman? I forced myself to look into the eyes of the woman I had so cruelly betrayed. Her eyes reflected a lot of emotions. I saw defiance, anger, shock, and confusion, all of them fighting for dominance in one person. The challenge disappeared briefly, and a tear rolled down the cheeks of the woman I had loved more than my own life for 15 years. I felt I had to remain silent in front of her, and I braced myself to face her justified anger. Who was that? Karen. What? Your new secretary? The one you told me about less than a month ago that she was, and I quote, ordinary? I did not deny that I lied to my wife. I was lying. Through my teeth. My gaze returned to the wooden surface between us. The huskiness in her voice at the next words made it clear that Julie was holding back her sobs. How old is she? She turned 28 yesterday. Do you know when her birthday is? There was clearly shock and pain in her voice, and I chose to remain silent. There's no point in making her feel any worse. Oh my God. So, what did I witness? A 39-year-old man gives a birthday present to a psychopathic bitch who has daddy issues? Again, I chose to remain silent. What was the point of telling her that Karen had quietly but persistently started stalking her boss, me, shortly after she was hired? Ever since my faithful old secretary June retired 6 months ago. It was June who conducted the interview and eventually recommended Karen. Her flirtation was so subtle that naive old me didn't even notice anything. A couple of weeks ago, Karen brought this to my attention so that I could finally see all the episodes and moments from a new perspective. And how long has this been going on? It was the first time, Julie. Honestly. Julie looked at me critically. I stared back at her, not afraid of being caught in a lie. Yesterday, Karen and I crossed the line physically for the first time. How unlucky are Karen and I? We had just undressed and were rubbing against each other as awkwardly as only two people can, nervous and unfamiliar with each other's body, when I heard my wife's offended squeal just before the lights went out. One minute I was in my marital bed with Julie with a violent boner, and the next I was in an uncomfortable hospital bed with anything but a boner, unless that's what you call a terrible headache. Julie's eyes searched my eyes for the truth. I did her the courtesy of keeping eye contact until she was satisfied. I noticed the moment when she admitted that I was being honest, when the anger quickly disappeared to be replaced by what? Uncertainty? A feeling that must almost automatically arise in every deceived spouse. Just now you thought you knew your spouse, your world, and, to some extent, your future. The next moment, the ground is knocked out from under your feet, and nothing will be the way you thought. The word quicksand comes to mind. Anything but a solid foundation, rather a whole pile of shit that you fall into and drown in. Questions immediately arise. What did I do wrong? How inadequate was I? What was I wrong about? These feelings must have been crushing her, and I was the reason for it. The questions tormenting her are also my fault. I let her have the conversation, and later there would be an apology, which I thought I should have brought to her. I know I've been bitchy for months, Steve, sullen and distant from you and the kids, but it was because of the upcoming promotion at work. You knew that. Oh, I knew everything perfectly well. Julie and 3 of her colleagues were fighting each other, competing for one job, a significant promotion. The other 3 were not married and had no children. Julie explained that in her new position, the working hours would not be as regular as in her current position. One would expect her to stay for half an hour or until half the night, when it would be necessary to meet the deadline. She wanted to impress the manager and show him that the fact that she was a wife and mother would not interfere, although I indicated that it would. Stubborn Julie, of course, could not accept this. Instead, she threw herself into impressing the boss, despite the damage it was doing to her relationship with me and her children. The new norm for Julie has now become to stay at work for an hour or two, stumble home to eat everything I've cooked, and then retire to the office to do homework until the children go to bed. Hell, quite often I'd fall asleep before she was done. On Saturdays, Julie often either went to the office or worked from home, which meant that every Sunday she needed to rest, and she was grumpy like a cat that sat on a wire brush. If all 4 hopeful applicants worked as hard as Julie, then the boss got a lot of work done for free. I know I've neglected you and the kids, Steve. I know that apart from a few quick hookups when you were harassing me, we weren't, close for a while, but it was going to end soon. You knew that. The increase will be announced at the end of the month. If I get this position, I will have to return to work only a couple of times a week and travel from time to time. If I don't get it, I'll tell Mark where he can shove his fucking job. Given your thriving business, I can afford to spend time looking for something else. There was silence again, and we stared at each other for a moment that seemed to last more hours than seconds. All this time, Julie held both my hands in hers. After breaking eye contact, she looked over my shoulder and let go of my hands as if they had burned her, and quickly put hers back on her lap under the table. I was briefly distracted by my throbbing headache and, unconsciously reaching out, felt the bandage on my head. At the same time, I wanted it to be wound tighter and looser. Anything to ease the pain. Was I so inconsiderate that I pushed you into the arms of another? I didn't say anything. I have already tried and failed to align my recent behavior with the belief system I have adhered to since I was old enough to make my own judgments. There is no excuse for betraying those who deserve your trust. Julie's thoughts and emotions were obviously running back and forth. According to her expression, she was a woman who was betrayed, with all the pain, uncertainty, and anger that inevitably follows. There was silence between us. Do you have any idea how I feel, Steve? To come home early, to what should have been a safe haven in my house, into the comforting arms of my husband, to find him in my bed with his fucking secretary? I mean, he's too stingy to fork out for a room in a cheap motel, and too insensitive to use a fool in some other room in the house. You should have destroyed our sanctuary with your disgusting behavior. Yours, your betrayal. You know I'm never going to sleep in this bed again, don't you? I just kept a neutral expression on my face and lowered my eyes. I realized that tears were coming out of Julie's eyes again, from her sobbing and the roughness of her voice. That's not fair, Steve. How can I compete with her? Do you remember what you always told me when we were newlyweds? What is more than what fits in your hand? Is it a surplus? Did you lie? Did you want to hold some other people's 4s in your hands? Are you bored with my 2s? I was going to say Krav Maga, a mix of boxing, martial arts, and street fighting developed by the Israeli Defense Forces. Karen is an expert. This is the same fighting technique that Matt Damon uses in all the Jason Bourne movies. That's why she wasn't afraid of you after you knocked me out. But Julie was on a roll. Yes, fit and slim, not like me, right? I have a soft belly after carrying your children. Your fucking kids, Steve. I know that I've gained a little weight lately. I wasn't eating right and I was too tired to go to the gym. I'll fix it all when it's all over. Julia stopped, breathing heavily. I was wondering if it was worth defending myself at this moment. Should I tell her that she interrupted Karen and me before I actually came in, so to speak? I decided not to do that. The obstacle to my defense was that Julie must have heard just before she caught us, "God, Karen, you're so tight." Julie must have read my mind. "You've often told me that," she said as her unfocused eyes looked back at 15 years ago. She quickly regained her focus, and a determined Julie returned. These relations, our relations, are not balanced now. You have no idea what that shit I saw yesterday is doing to a person, how it crushes the soul and destroys the ego. It hurts so much. It's worse than being stabbed. Until you feel exactly what I feel, our relationship is not going anywhere. She stopped, breathing heavily. The shrew that my loving wife has turned into in recent months has indeed returned. Saliva flew as her fear and self-doubt turned to rage. Realizing that in her anger she was abandoning moral principles with her unilateral decisions, she forced herself to calm down again. "I can't believe you got our bed so dirty, Steve. What do you say, after I get my revenge, when you really realize how devastated I am, we go and buy a new mattress, huh?" This time, she clearly wanted me to contribute to the conversation. I was considering whether to start by saying, "Yes, I know what it feels like to be attacked by a loved one, and I have stitches to confirm it. But it was too cheap. She left me so many opportunities. Where were you going to use Mark, Julie? My wife's hands quickly hit the bottom edge of the table, in an attempt to reach her chin before it hit the countertop. What? It's not a difficult question, Julie. Your boss, Mark, the man who was right behind you when you entered our bedroom yesterday. Where were you going to use him this time? In our bed. How do you usually do? Tell me, whose idea was it? Him? Did he enjoy the idea of using you in the bed we shared? Or was it you? Did you come up with the idea of humiliating me? To know that I slept on the bed that you defiled with another man? Julie's mouth opened and closed like a guppy fish on steroids. You don't need to show me what it's like to witness someone you've loved and trusted for years stab you in the back. This moment came for me when I left work early one day when I felt sick. You should be able to remember the exact date, unless you were too focused on getting that promotion. What was your logic, Julie? I may not have all the natural advantages of my competitors, but I can show him that this mature woman can give him what they can't. And before you ask, yes, I know what it's like to see your partner with someone younger, slimmer, and judging by your words that I overheard when I got to the bedroom, what was it? Now it was my turn to stop and breathe heavily. Anger, searing and white-hot. What I felt that day, and while watching subsequent recordings, still hasn't cooled down. It didn't take long to ignite the flames of rage. At least the anger hid the pain. The slightest thought of betraying Julie was like sprinkling salt on an open wound. Damn it. Feel it. Karen's reaction when I trusted her in a moment of pain was outrage. When I then showed her the recordings, her reaction was pretty much the same as mine. I was touched that she was angry and offended because of me. The fact that she was glad that she was finally able to admit her interest in developing a relationship with me greatly calmed my ego. When did you become so dumb, Julie? Don't you think the girls in your office saw what you were doing? Damn it, Julie, 2 of the other applicants I know of have also been in Mark's bed for the last 6 weeks. His wife can now get records with the 3 of you at any time. For the record, Karen and I were close enough just yesterday to teach you a little lesson, but I'm sure we'll change that as soon as we can. She's at home now, getting to know Jen and Lauren. They got along great when I left. They've been missing female attention ever since you pulled away so emotionally. Karen wants children. They want an interested mother. As for me, everyone wins. I could see Julie's eyes practically rolling from everything I was saying. It was not a pleasant sight. For old time's sake, I waited and said nothing. But, Steve, I did it just for us. This increase brings in an additional $20,000 a year. Think about what this can do for us. I don't need to think, Julie. I've seen what this does for us. It made you a shrew that was hard to live with and turned you into a fool. And it destroyed our house. With the first confirmation that her decisions threatened her family, Julie's hands popped out from under the table and reached for mine, gripping them tightly. The guard who was watching the visitors in the pretrial detention cells came up and spoke loudly. No physical contact. I let you get away with it once, Mrs. Brown. Don't try your luck. Take your hands off, or you will be returned to your cell immediately. Julie looked down at her orange jumpsuit as if she had just remembered where she was. She looked at me pleadingly. Get me out of here, please, Steve. What? And not give Karen the opportunity to meet our children? But I'm your wife, Steve. You have to forgive me. Take me back. Why, Julie? Why bring back someone I'll never trust again? Why give my children to someone who endangers their emotional well-being for a little thing like money? Then fuck you, Steve, when I get out. I'll make sure that you and your fool never see my children. I smiled and shook my head sadly. Now that it suited her, they were her children. Oh, Julie, wake up and smell the dog shit. Unless you find some other idiot who will bail you out, you will stay here until the trial. Then, according to my lawyer, the assault will almost certainly be punishable by imprisonment. You won't get the full 7 years according to the statute, but even a suspended sentence will mean that there will be no custody of the children. I watched how terrible the woman I once loved looked, realizing that instead of being here to bail her out and explain to the jailers that it was all a mistake, it was in my best interest to press charges, using Karen as a witness to keep her here. That put her at the back of the queue for money and lawyers, not to mention any post-divorce benefits. It was not a pleasant sight. Gone was the arrogance based on the assumption that she would soon come out to subject me to suffering as a cuckold. In its place came the sudden realization that she should have used the time she had spent threatening to humiliate me to beg me to help her out. Suddenly, she looked very, very bad. Should I tell her that what she witnessed between Karen and me was just a setup to provoke her? That my only blunder of getting into Karen won't happen again while I follow my moral code, at least until we are legally separated? Should I tell her that courts rarely sentence people to prison for assault these days, especially if a fit of rage was provoked, as in her case? Come on, Julie. Accept that you gambled and lost. Now you're getting a divorce. Accept that you screwed up of your own free will, and maybe when you get out, the girls will still want to have something in common with you. Join the fight, and I'm pretty sure you'll lose them forever. In fact, I'll take care of it. Goodbye, Julie. I loved you once. With that, Steve got up and walked over to the barred door to the visitor's room. The guard let him out, and without looking back, he headed for his car, smiling at the thought of 3 beautiful girls waiting for him at home. After leaving the punishment cell, Steve hurried to the car in which he arrived. Its driver was lying on the hood, enjoying the late morning rays. Hey, wake up. How did it go with you? About as you predicted. Threats. Thought she had moral grounds. Blah, blah, blah. Well, now she knows where she stands with me. You know, overall it was very soothing, just like you said. Thank you, brother. What are older brothers for? Thanks anyway, Dave. End.